Hi, I'm John Delano, political editor of KDKA-TV, and our special guest is Sean Parnell, the Republican candidate for Congress in the 17th Congressional District. Sean, it's great to be with you. Thank you, sir, very much for spending time with me.
Good to be with you too, John. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So let me ask you right from the get-go about your running for Congress. It always seems to me that President Trump kind of pushed you into this by making an announcement in, I think it was last October. I was at the event, and basically declaring you a candidate before you had declared. Is that what happened?
Yeah, pretty much. I left the military. I mean, I was in Afghanistan. I led an infantry platoon at the height of the hunt for bin Laden back in 2006. I was wounded over there in Afghanistan, was medically retired from the military, broken, and then went back to grad school, and then started writing books. And my first book was Outlaw Platoon, and believe me when I tell you that was unexpected when that book took off. You know, I'm not John Grisham, you know what I mean? So there was no expectation that book would do well at all. It was just, for me, it was about telling the story of my troops. And that book gave me an opportunity to give back to my country in a different ways, whether it's with charity work or doing speaking engagements and stuff. And yeah, all that changed in October of 2019 when President Trump called me out. And you said you were there. I wasn't even there. I was in South Carolina doing a charity event. We had just given a service dog to a veteran, and I walk off the stage, John, and my phone is just blowing up. I mean, it was ringing off the hook. And my mom was one of those people, and my mom is a huge President Trump fan. And I see her texting in real time, and I'm like, Mom, what's going on here? I really thought that there was a death in the family or something. And come to find out, she said the president called you out and mentioned you in his speech and said you were running for Congress. And I'm like, what? And I didn't believe her. And she sent me a video, you know, and sure enough, the president's right there. And I'm like, okay, well, all right, let's do this. So turned everything up and now I'm on the race.
Well, you're obviously you're the official Republican candidate for Congress right now. And have you had contact with the president? Has he talked to you at all about the race?
I did talk to him once. And so this is what's so crazy. So again, left the military broken, in 2010, I was medically retired. 10 years later, I was riding around in the motorcade with Vice President Pence. And so I'll tell you the whole story. So I go, you know, how the vice president came here a couple months ago, and
I was there for that too. That was
maybe it was
VFW. He went to a VFW.
Yeah, there was a VFW event, and then he came again. Maybe it was about a month ago, and I just was there with the members of the PA GOP congressional delegation, just watching his speech. And at the end of the speech, I'm just standing there, I think, with Guy Reschenthaler and Mike Kelly, and the vice president like gives me the knife hand, and he said, "You step into my office," and I'm like is he talking to me? And I said, okay. So I get in his office, and I'm in his up-armored truck, sitting right next to him, and his body man, right? Have you ever seen the show Veep, John? It felt like a scene out of Veep with his body man. He's got his bag and like his lip gloss in the bag. And the vice president's just talking to me, and he's just honestly one of the most remarkable people I've ever talked to. I mean, you wouldn't believe the story. I mean, he's told me the story of how when he was a kid, he was pumping gas as, I guess, Michael Dukakis ran for president a long time ago. And as a kid, the vice president's pumping gas, and he's waving at Michael Dukakis' motorcade, and he stops the motorcade, winds down the window, and waves to the vice president. And the vice president said, "That's when I realized that maybe serving the people was going to be my path." And I was just like, boy, this is crazy. But again, it's just a broken veteran that 10 years later riding with the vice president. And so a couple minutes later, John, the phone starts ringing in the truck, and it was the president. And I was just like, how is this my life? How is this my life? And so, yeah, he talked to me a little bit about, quite frankly, didn't do much talking, but I just said, you know, thank you for the opportunity and the support, Mr. President. And he sort of talked the rest of the time.
Yeah. Well, he certainly likes to tweet about you. He's always tweeting. He tweets about you and also about the incumbent Congressman Lamb. Let me ask you, if I may, first, what do you like best about President Trump, and why should voters in this area vote to reelect him?
Well, I mean, what I like the most about President Trump is that I feel, he's a fighter. For a long time, Republicans have, I think, by and large, the electorate have wanted somebody who was going to fight for them. And, I tell people all the time, like, does President Trump always say the perfect thing? No. Does he always approach issues with tact? No. But it's important to remember that this is a guy that grew up and spent his entire life in the New York City construction trade. And so I say, have you ever talked to a construction worker? Sometimes they're a little rough around the edges. Well, President Trump is as well. And I like that. I like that. I feel like he's a fighter. And does he always say the right thing? Absolutely not. But I think his policies have been good for the country. And by and large, I feel like he has the backs of the people, not just Republicans, but everybody.
Do you think if you are somebody who supports Donald Trump, you should clearly vote for Sean Parnell? And if you support Joe Biden, you should vote for Conor Lamb?
Well, I sort of, my whole platform really, John, is about trying to bring people together. Do I agree with the president on every issue? No, but I reject the idea and the premise that I should have to, right? I mean, you sit down with my family around the Thanksgiving table and we don't agree on anything and we're family. So no, I don't have to agree with the president on everything. And I think, certainly I support the president, no question about it. And by the way, the president has been good to me, and so, I think that, if you're a Trump voter, obviously, I think that you should vote for me. But also, if you're a Biden voter, you should really think long and hard about voting for me as well, because my job is to represent the people. And the bedrock of my leadership philosophy in Afghanistan was one that you hear all the time, John, that great leaders are supposed to inspire their troops as a young military officer in training. And boy, that's true. But when lives were on the line, and we were almost overrun countless times, I watched kids whose job before being in the infantry, before carrying a machine gun in the mountains of Afghanistan, was high school shortstop. These are kids from all over the country, from all walks of life, Democrats, Republicans, Christians, atheists, Muslims, Northerners, Southerners, all in the same foxhole. And it was my job to bring together that motley crew of people in one of the most hostile regions on the face of the planet. So I realized in Afghanistan, where the rubber meets the road and lives are on the line, that leadership is all about bringing people together. And so, I told you earlier on in this interview, I'm running as a Republican with an R after my name, but I certainly reject party politics to a certain extent. And my job will be to do what's right on behalf of the people here, not necessarily what's right on behalf of the Republican Party. So I'm going for every voter in PA 17, not just Republicans.
So how has Congressman Lamb failed this district? And what is it that you would do differently?
Well, I don't think we have enough time in the interview to go over everything.
But I'll pick a few.
Well, look, I'll tell you, his first ad was carrying an AR-15. He said he was going to be pro-gun. Now he has an F rating from the NRA. He tells people that he's pro-life. Then he goes and votes against the Born Alive Act in every radical piece of pro-choice legislation there is. Said he was going to support President Trump. And in fact, some of his first remarks from the podium in his victory speech was thanking conservatives and Trump voters for putting him there. And then he goes and votes to impeach President Trump on 2 accounts and has voted against him almost a significant percent of the time. He's voting against President Trump. And then he tells people that he's going to oppose Nancy Pelosi. And while he certainly did not vote for her as speaker in a ceremonial vote. Obviously we all know that Nancy Pelosi gave him a pass on that. He's voted with her over 90% of the time. And so my position is like, Democrat or Republican, you misled the people of this district. You said he's a case study in saying one thing in the district and governing a very different way in Washington. And so what I tell people is that, especially look, when I talk to Democrats and Republicans, is like, he misrepresented himself to conservatives to win that seat. How long before he misrepresents himself to moderate Democrats? It's not going to be long. And so to me, the job is to represent the people. And if you mislead the people, that's disqualifying. How
do you feel about his views on energy issues? Fracking and natural gas, our petrochemical plant being constructed in Beaver, those are all part of the 17th district. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, John, I mean, I think that's a great question. I mean, obviously, oil and gas is a major pillar of our economy here in Western Pennsylvania. There are probably, there are over 100,000 oil and gas or jobs that are supported by the oil and gas industry here in Western Pennsylvania. And that includes ancillary jobs that are downstream from that, steel and manufacturing, all sort of flow in to the confluence of oil and gas. And so, look, with Congressman Lamb, you can't listen to what he says about the oil and gas industry here in Western Pennsylvania. You have to watch what he does and look at his voting card. This is a guy that voted to block our withdrawal from the Paris Climate Accords. And if he had gotten what he wanted and we found ourselves tied up in the Paris Climate Accords, that would have been economically devastating for our region. He voted to ban offshore drilling in 2 locations. And so he's certainly not been a friend of the oil and gas industry here in Western Pennsylvania. And then also his endorsement of Biden. Again, Biden has tried to walk back what he calls gaffes in debates about banning no new fracking or phasing out fossil fuels altogether. The bottom line is that under an Obama-Biden administration for 8 years, Pennsylvania lost tens of thousands of manufacturing jobs in that 8 years. And in 40 plus years in Washington, Joe Biden has not been a friend to the American working class. In fact, John, his latest energy platform, I mean, obviously Congressman Lamb is on this, is now, and as if it wasn't worse enough to have Congressman Lamb voting with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez 90+% of the time, she's now his boss on this energy task force as the co-chair. Look, that plan says right there on page 1 and page 43 that it will accommodate put oil and gas energy workers out of business. It says the Unity Task Force supports investing in the education and training of unemployed energy workers for jobs in clean energy related industries. Now I'll tell you this, John, we have 51 million people unemployed in this country. Anybody that has an energy plan or economic plan that's going to put more people out of work should not be elected in November.
Your comments are very interesting because, of course, I asked him about his service on this task force under John Kerry and AOC, as you pointed out. I mean, he basically said that he was standing up for Western Pennsylvania and that there is no mention of fracking in that particular plan. The congressman would say it's future oriented and that he has been a strong proponent of petrochemicals and natural gas and workers. But you can't turn a blind eye to environmental issues. You've got to kind of have a cop on the beat, I think is the way he put it. Are you're basically saying that he says one thing but does another?
Yes, absolutely. And again, his voting record proves that. And again, if you go to Joe Biden's website, Joe Biden will say over and over again, and so will Congressman Lamb, that Joe Biden does not support the Green New Deal. But if you click on the environmental tab on Joe Biden's website, it talks about the Green New Deal being a crucial framework for this country's environmental demands moving forward. And what I'll say about hydraulic fracturing in the oil and gas industry and the climate. If climate is something that is important to you, and we should all be steadfast protectors of our environment, we all have a responsibility, then we should embrace, John, we should embrace market-based innovation transitions from coal to cleaner burning natural gas. I mean, we have decreased our carbon footprint here in America every year for the last 20 years, even beyond the standards that are set forth in the Paris Climate Accord. So if climate means something to you, and again, it should mean something to all of us, we should be embracing the market-based innovations of oil and natural gas and not talking about it as if it's some bridge field to nothing. As far as energy, we need an all of the above approach. I mean, where we can use greener and renewable energy sources, we should use them. But we should not also write off, the importance of fracking in terms of, especially with regards to how important fracking and natural gas movement is in our, in the fact that we are now an energy independent country. I mean, that's a big deal. It keeps energy costs low for everybody. And from a strategic standpoint, gives the president, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, an unbelievable amount of strategic flexibility in the White House. And that's something that we should want for any president. Like I said, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican. We should want any president to have that level of flexibility in the White House.
Finally, let me ask you about the campaign. First off, it's got to be a bit challenging to try to run in the middle of a pandemic.
It is.
How has that impacted the way you campaign?
Well, it has a lot. I mean, in December and January and even going into Lent, I mean, my goodness, we were going to so many fish fries or omega-3 fatty acids. I was I was getting all of them that I needed. And then all of a sudden, everything just stopped. And so we've had to shift our focus from doing in-person events and doing door knocking to really doing phone banking and doing, Zoom calls like this. We put together book clubs and just tried to be creative with regards to how we engage our volunteers to keep them engaged. And so, I think one of our volunteers put together a book club for Outlaw Platoon where, we'd get our volunteers on and they'd ask me questions about my service in Afghanistan or questions about foreign policy. So I think we've shifted our focus to running a more virtual campaign. But also it's all about fundraising, right? And so I sit in this office all the time and do everything I can to raise money because, as someone who covers politics.
On that score, congratulations to you. You out fundraised Conor Lamb. I think you raised over $700,000 in the last quarter to his $400,000 plus. Now he still has you beat by $500,000 overall.
Not for long.
You can't help but be impressed by how well you're doing. Where's that money coming from, Sean?
I get a list of people and I just call down that list. In the first quarter, my priority was trying to raise as much money as humanly possible in the district, because if I'm going to be beholden to anybody, it should be the people in the district. But the truth is that national money put Conor Lamb in that seat. The DCCC invested over $8.5 million to put Conor Lamb in that seat in 2018. So national money put him there. So I'm doing everything I can to call around this country and really, it's not about necessarily investing in me, right? It's about investing in a vision of the future of this country and what we want this country to be for the next generation of our kids. That's really what I try to embody when I talk to potential donors. And so it's, and also trying to give people a way to even get involved with $1, right? So we had over 9,000 contributions in Q2, and I think over 8,000 individual contributions. And I think that's just because our movement, John, is about bringing together people from all walks of life and convincing them to get off the sidelines and not just invest in the future of the country, but take action, right? And I think that's why, John, we've got, and I mean this, over 1,000 volunteers that have signed up for here in Western Pennsylvania that have come out, that have said, I've never been involved in a political campaign before, but America means something to me, and I'm going to fight for it. And I'm going to fight for those people and everybody else.
Well, that sort of leads into the last question I have for you, which is essentially, why should people right here in the 17th District in Western Pennsylvania, why should they vote for Sean Parnell over Conor Lamb?
Because my mission is to preserve the American way of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for everybody. My mission is not to align myself with a political party. There's only one candidate in this race that can say they will be a truly independent voice for this region, and that's me. And so my job is to represent the people first, last, and always. I did that with my troops in Afghanistan when I put my life on the line for this country, and the life on the line for my troops. And I'm going to do it again with the people of PA-17. I'm going to be a warrior for this region and not for a political party. You can bank on that. I'm not a career politician. I'll tell you right here, right now in this interview, my goal is to go to Washington, D.C., hit the reset button on everything, give the power back to the people in this country, and then buy 100 acres if I can afford it in Western Pennsylvania and a horse ranch and probably live a life of solitude. So I'm not a career politician. I think you know that. But I will be a steadfast and independent voice for the people here. You can bank on that.
Sean Parnell, the Republican candidate for Congress in the 17th Congressional. Thank you so much for being with you. It's always fun to talk. Thank you.
Thanks, John. You're the best.
Thank you, sir.